Well, good evening there, Professor Jen. Tonight happens to be a Wednesday night, little middle of winter action here. A little bit of snow, a little bit of ice, a little bit of wind, a little bit of everything. My favorite season of all time is always winter because you can always put more clothes on versus summer, you can only take so much off. But I love winter. I love the stillness and the coldness outside. I love reflective time for myself. I love to see wildlife, taking pause, trying to figure out where they're going to eat, taking shelter, resting, hibernation, to be, vibrant for other seasons. I say thank you to Captioning Services, I do all the time for all the work that they do for us. I can't imagine not having Captioning Services. Very important role they play in so many people's lives. There was a time and place that we really have to acknowledge that these type of services just didn't exist. And then that meant that many people couldn't come to the table because we didn't have the extension of language for everyone. Anyhow, this evening, you see in this little picture, I always love to bring a picture with me. You know that. I have Streetcar. And I'm going to talk this evening. Again, our topic, why do we keep telling the same stories and over and over again? Why do we have, these same subject matter? Why do we see particular aspects of symbolism in and within our culture, in the arts especially, right? Referential in photograph, film, music, etc. Why? Again, Tennessee Williams, by the time I'm done with you, you're going to know a lot about Tennessee Williams. It's just that we bring him along in so many of our discussions because he was ahead of his time, in my opinion, just like Shakespeare ahead of his time, Geoffrey Chaucer and his contemporaries, Thoreau, we have Ralph Waldo Emerson, Emily Dickinson, all these voices and visions from years and years ago that talked about these very deep subjects. But, as we moved along, we sometimes reframe work. We look at something, we say, it was told to us this way, that way, but it really could mean some other things. I think often about the play by Tennessee called Streetcar Named Desire, right? Such an interesting sentence, such an interesting name, interesting title. I'll tell you why. Streetcar Named Desire. You know the streetcar? I gave you a picture. And the streetcar comes in fast, it comes in quick, it delivers, it goes away, it carries people to and from. It's what it is. It's a lot of metal. It's heavy. It's a service. Okay. Streetcar Named Desire. And in this play that Tennessee gives us, uh, it's the same thing. It's about a man and about a woman, and then about a lot of other men and women that become secondary characters in this play about desire, wanting to be loved, wanting to be lust, wanting to feel good, wanting to have sexual gratification. You see, but Tennessee couldn't say all those things in the 1950s, my dears. He would have been censored terribly. He couldn't just spit that out. So he gave us, a streetcar named Desire, hot and heavy, full of metal, you know, to have this idea that it comes in fully loaded, fully charged. But what is this play really about? The play, which had been made into, of course, a film, the play is really about domestic violence. It's about mental illness. It's about rape. It's about incest, that boundaries that get crossed in relationships and in family settings, secret keeping. It's about lies and covering up sex, sexual activity. Because in order to maintain status quo, Tennessee Williams tells us at the end of the play, you just got to move on, honey. You just got to keep on keeping on, really is the message that Tennessee gives us through his characters. So in in this particular play, and I will reference it probably also as the film Streetcar Named Desire, it's provocative. When we hear the word provocative in pop culture, we all of a sudden think sex. I don't think it's just sex. I think anything that provokes us, provocation, anything that provokes us to really take pause, to really say, is this something that could really happen? How do we deal with familial disappointment? How do we deal with boundaries that are crossed, right? Look at the Jerry Springer show. Look at all of this reality television, the Housewives series, Atlanta, New York, New Jersey. We have all of these, what is it, 90 day, married in 90 days. We have The Bachelor, The Bachelorette. We have all this reality television, and we've got, what are the other ones there? Snooki and The Business with the Boardwalk, right? We have all this reality TV today that examines much of what Tennessee Williams gave us in Streetcar Named Desire. Everybody comes in hot. Everybody comes in panting. Everybody comes in looking like they're Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday best, right? Nobody looks like they were steamrolled. Everybody's putting their best foot forward, huffing, puffing, hair flying, makeup on, tan, buff, worked out, best clothing, all of it. Because why? Because we want to have that suitor. You see, we want to have this person that we snag, that we say, oh, so provocative, so salacious, so attractive. We must have them. But in Streetcar Named Desire, Stanley Kowalski there, he's married to one woman, but he's going after her sister, the sister Blanche Dubois. She comes to live with them because she has a little mental health issue. And Tennessee really doesn't tell us that in the 1950s. We see it, we know what it is, but you know, there were times, places, standards where people just couldn't come out and say mental health issue. It seemed like criminal to have to admit when one had mental health issue. Maybe it destroyed their career, maybe it destroyed their reputation, maybe it destroyed their relationships, their credibility, their personal credibility. We know today that people who have mental health issues, you look at NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness, they say it's 1 in 3 of us that are going to be depressed, anxious. That number seems realistic to me. Look around, anybody in here go to Walgreens, CVS? What, I'm the only person standing on the line at the pharmacy? Oh, please. When COVID came to visit us, and so many people were in a situation where they became isolated and there was no streetcar rambling down to bring desire. Some of us remember we were in lockdowns and you sort of missed your cohorts, you missed intimacy, you missed peers. For people that were sexually active, maybe they missed having interaction. I mean, certainly if you're not going to breathe air, and exchange germs, you're probably not going out and having private relations, sexual relations as easy as one was before, right? The whole idea, heaven forbid we were breathing each other's oxygen and walking in the same direction, you know, caused a lot of people a lot of sadness, caused a lot of people a lot of aloneness, a lot of isolationism. And so people are still recovering. Here we're going on 5 years since COVID visited all of us. Remember the famous words, give us 2 weeks. I never want to hear those sentences again. It was much longer than 2 weeks, my darlings. But, people were driven to go to the doctor. We were all of a sudden doing telehealth. Tell us what's bothering you. People were getting prescriptions based on how they were feeling at the moment, feeling so out of control, feeling so uneasy about the future, so sad, and perhaps even temporarily grieving their ability to be social, their ability to be sexual, their ability to be intellectual. their ability to be present. There were people that had vacations that were planned, they got panned. There were people I knew that were getting married, the weddings were reduced to 3 and 4 people or online, okay? So mental health, the door really did get open in 2020 because so many people were in the same place at the same time that we were really all discussing the same things. I say of myself in reflection as it relates to literature, plays, television, conversation, articles, where we are in contemporary culture, pop culture. I really didn't feel sadness during the pandemic, though I was locked up and cooped up like everybody else, not having my usual interactions, but I went out every single day. I'm a big nature person. I love to be out in nature. I was out every single day. I'd pack my lunch. I'd go over by the train tracks. We'd watch trains come and go. We'd drag our masks around. I would go with some of my kids. At the time, one of my children, uh, who's in adulthood, he and I would go out, we would grab lunch, bring it from the house, eat outside, then we'd go to the library with the masks on. We'd sit outside in folding chairs, even in inclement weather, because we wanted to be out, we wanted to be engaged. We didn't want to feel that we were encumbered in any way, that we were hampered in any way. But not everybody had that. Not everybody had that kind of spirit, or not everybody's meant to be outdoors. As time went on, and the weather got better. If you remember, it all started March 13th, 2020, the big lockdowns. Certainly when the weather started to lift here, I started to go out to lakes, beaches. I didn't care. I was out all day living my best life with my family. We'd play the radio, go out for barbecues, sit at the lake, and you looked at a snapshot, you didn't think we were in the middle of a pandemic, but that's how we were living. And I look at Streetcar Named Desire, we have poor Blanche there, we look at her, this character, right? Especially in the film version, she's so pretty, she's so put together, she's living her best life, but she's really falling apart on the inside. And we as the audience, we see it because Tennessee wants us to see it. He wants us to see the combination of beauty and frailty at the same time. Somebody who seems like she's in control, sexually, uh, what can we say, in attractiveness, very in control, calling the shots. But he also wants us to see how weak she is, how vulnerable, how easily she can be victimized. He wants us to see this dichotomy in pop culture, reality television. That's what I think is part of the draw, that, whether we all sit here and say to one another, oh, I don't watch those shows, well, then we're not really being very truthful because the ratings tell us otherwise. That the reality television, really since the Springer days, Jerry Springer, it has really taken off because it seems that we want to see the whole person. We want to see the upside. We want to see the success. We want to see the victor. We want to see the person that always seems to win. Why do we love game shows? I remember when I was in college, we had the show The Price is Right. We used to watch this show constantly. And remember, I went to school in the 1980s and 90s. We loved to watch it. We loved to get to know the people who were on the show. We wanted to know all about them. This was before we had social media, social platforms. So we were just so drawn in that they were real people like me, real people like you. They had flaws, they had imperfections, they were nervous, they were in the moment, they had authenticity. We wanted to see all that. We wanted to see them win, we wanted to see them lose. I remember when I was in high school, Jeopardy was a very big show. And I remember a lot of us in high school used to watch Jeopardy. First was Wheel of Fortune at 7 o'clock at night, Eastern Standard Time. And then it was Jeopardy that followed. And I remember many of us, the time I went to high school in Miami Beach, and it was as hot as the devil, somewhere between May, June, July, August, September, right, in Florida. And we'd all just sit glued. We could have been at the beach swimming. We'd sit glued in the evening to watch these two shows because we were watching reality. It was really reality television, the game shows. We were watching somebody's joys, somebody's disappointment just by the spin of the wheel, right? Maybe they bought the wrong vowel, okay? In Jeopardy, maybe they got the math wrong in the Daily Double. I mean, there were just so many different aspects that could have gone wrong. And we sort of enjoyed watching how people recovered from their mistakes. Remember the words, we saw it in Price is Right, we saw it in so many other game shows, the consolation prize. This very strong voice would come over and say, we're so sorry to see you lose and we have to say goodbye now, but you leave with all these goodies, In a strange way, we wanted to always be part of the consolation prize. We wanted to be able to say, well, at least we got something, even if it was vicarious. Back to Tennessee Williams and Streetcar Named Desire, we're sort of rooting for Blanche, On one hand, she meets this suitor that works with Stanley Kowalski, her brother-in-law, and Stanley Kowalski's horrible to her. He rapes her. He lies to her sister. He lies to the community. He says that she made the rape up, the sexual assault up, and that, of course, she has no credibility because, she's mentally ill, and who can trust somebody who's so vulnerable and has all of this illness. So you see, Blanche was going to lose no matter what. There wasn't going to be consolation prize for Blanche at all. And that's the part of the reality and why we tell these stories over and over again. Why the play later on, the film Streetcar Named Desire, is really still a popular pop culture classic because it sort of talks about the fact that it's amazing the damage one person can do. Just like I just talked to you about the game shows, you can have all the skill in the world, but if you spin the wheel wrong, then luck takes over and all of your skill goes out the window. That so much of who we are and what happens to us, we can do all the right things, okay? You can do all the right things and then still just be very unlucky. We can meet the wrong person at the wrong time. It's like that saying we have that we hear often, if I could just go back in time and just keep walking as if I never met you, how much different my life would be if I could just unmeet that person. And so Blanche doesn't get those opportunities. Tennessee Williams is really so brave in the 1950s, wants to talk about the fact that she has this mental illness and that yet other people do find her attractive and they do see that she has value even though she has this mental illness. He takes such a brave position because clearly in literature, uh, I say we, cultural context and mores and values for many decades, maybe we could even say many centuries, we've discounted persons that had mental illness as being simple or foolish or to be somebody that has to be taken care of, like custodial care. They can't be a full person. And here we know otherwise, that all of us, NAMI again, National Association of Mental Illness, they talk about how so many people have places in their lives where they face disappointment, they face loss, grief, right? They face situations that are unfixable, or perhaps places in their life where things change so drastically that people just can't, we're only human, we're not machines. We just can't keep up with our coping strategies. And we know today it's certainly not a sign of weakness, absolutely not, to be able to go to counseling to rectify and identify things that are bothering us. A wonderful thing to be able to have support groups online, talk about reality TV, reality groups where people get together They have writing clubs that talk about grief, separation anxiety, PTSD, depression, sexual assault. How today we're not whispering about sexual assault. Men talk about sexual assault as it relates to victimization, how men have come forward really since the 1970s, and miraculously so, because so much of our culture has told men not to say anything, you see? And men have been coming forward and talking about things that have happened to them that have been very disappointing and have caused a lot of personal grief, sleepless nights, and anxiety, and how they're trying to recover from it rather than maybe, taking too many drugs, taking drugs and alcohol use, aggressiveness, etc. Men have been cut a lot of slack now, and it's a wonderful thing to empower people. So maybe that's why it's so important to keep telling these stories, especially in pop culture, to be able to look at somebody and say, they've suffered greatly, and we have to embrace. I guess I like that word, embrace. We have to embrace who the person is, the whole person, not just the pieces we want to see and discard the pieces we don't want to see. We want to embrace the whole person. As I deliver this little lecture cast for you, to you, our conversation, we're going through something in this country. I'm not going to make this a political statement. I'm just going to share with you that we're going through something now that we talk about, persons that might have had mental illness. We talk about accommodations, the word accommodations. We talk about now in the forefront. Every day it's been in the New York Times. I see it on Fox News. I see it on CNN. I see it on all these local streaming apps, national streaming apps. What do we do with the 504s for academic accommodation? What do we do with the IEP for accommodation? All of a sudden, we want to have big discussions, right? Big discussions about neurodivergency. We want to have big discussions about, is it psychiatric? Is ADD psychiatric? Is it medical? Is it social? Everybody wants to have these discussions. So we keep talking about all these accommodations, the people that are behind the paper, persons that need accommodations. And I think to myself, why don't we just talk about people? Why don't we just talk about people? And instead of looking at the whole process of 504s, IEPs, mental health, whatever it is that has to be addressed, right, in accommodation to help people meet their potential, to move on to their next best self, with dignity, etc. I think to myself, thank God we can even have these discussions today and defend ourselves. Like I have a neurodivergent son. I talk about him all the time because he's so splendid. He's just the love of my life. I probably sound like I'm tearing up as I share this with you. It's just so humbling to know him. And he tries so hard, and he had IEPs, he has 504, and he's so magnificent. And he has so much savvy, he sees things in people that many people would say he has deficit, intellectual deficit, intellectual disability, ID, DD, developmental disability. But yet he sees things in people that he makes observation, and it's really very rich because he really sees past the bullshit. You know what I mean? He really sees people for who they are. He doesn't see who he wants to see. You understand what I'm saying? He sees people for who they are, and he's able to take them at face value. Whereas maybe somebody like myself who doesn't have a lot of these circumstances and challenges, maybe I have the handicap, disability of seeing people as I wish I could see them. You see what I'm saying? Maybe I'm not seeing people authentically. Maybe I'm dressing them up in my mind, sort of like we do with reality TV. We're not seeing the real person every moment. We're seeing what we're shown. Maybe, maybe the reason we keep watching all these shows is to see when is it we're going to see the real person. I think of the show, this Bachelorette, how many women have we seen that, they're crying and sobbing their hearts out. They weren't picked, they didn't pick the right guy, the guy didn't want them in the Bachelor, and we get to see them break down, and then we say, my God, the real person has been revealed. Why didn't she show him that side of herself to begin with? Why didn't he show himself show her, that side of himself to begin with? And maybe what it is that in pop culture, we're trying to always achieve this place where we see things for how they are. We see people for how they are, not who it is we wish they would be. I'll close with this thought that there's all these sayings I see all over the place. I read a lot of self-help books. I really do enjoy them because, people are really saying the same thing over and over again. It's just the context that changes, because how many different ways can we possibly explain grief or humanity or coping skills? It's not infinite. And so I think about all these sayings that I read so often when authors might say, here's one, when people show you who they are, don't try to convince yourself otherwise. They've already shown you who they are. Or another saying in pop culture, I think, contemporary culture we have is, instead of listening to what somebody tells you, you can't really listen to what anybody tells you. You have to watch what they do. And once you watch what they do, you have a clear sense of how they feel about you or something else. Or another saying I can think about is like when people say, if you really want to get to know somebody or know what it is they love, pay very close attention to the pictures they take, because that will tell you, what their favorite subject is obviously what they enjoy taking pictures of. So we don't always have to pay attention to these signals. Back to Blanche DuBois, Streetcar Named Desire. Blanche says a lot of things. And so does Stanley Kowalski, her assailant. He says a lot of things. And the film becomes a dance between these two characters, because it's a dance where they both dance very close to the flame, meaning that on one hand, they each tell the truth at different times, polar opposites, and at other times they'll manipulate any truth that they have to in order to get out of an untruth. It's almost like a mathematical equation with these two. So I just wanted to bring you my insight on why it is that we look at all of these different forms of media and entertainment over and over again, different platforms, different genre, and why it is that we seem to give it our attention. Like I say, if we all want to say, well, I don't watch those things, somebody is. We're in the millions and millions of viewers, millions and millions of people on social platform every day. We're watching these things. We're somehow affected. Or maybe somebody would say we're infected. I don't know, we're affected. But something to give thought about, what is it we see? What is it we want to see? What is it we're supposed to see? How it is that we interpret what we see? So just my thoughts on that subject. Anyhow, I've taken up enough of your time on a winter night. So I wish you well always. Do something wonderful for yourself. It should be somewhere around Valentine's Day or even post-Valentine's Day. So if nothing else, be kind to yourself and have a lovely evening. Good night.